Florence, Images of America. Meet the authors of this new book coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at the Fox 43 studio. We're focused on a new book that's been out a little more than a month, Florence, Images of America, and we're visiting with one of the co-authors, Brenda Harrison. Good morning, Brenda.
Good morning, Greg.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Well, I'm excited.
It's great to spend a little time and, of course, getting Jennifer in 15 minutes to talk a little bit about some of the exciting photos y'all had in this pictorial, and, of course, a lot of editorial in there as well, but some amazing pictures.
Thank you.
Truly amazing. How did y'all come together and come across all these photos?
Well, actually, the book idea was Jennifer's. She had gotten some information from Arcadia, who publishes these books around the country. And she came to me because I, of course, work at the News Journal, and for about the last 13 years, I have been running each week on the front of our paper an old picture. And it's real popular with our readers. And so I had a lot of connections with people that I have borrowed pictures from. And so Jennifer approached me about doing this book together, and I was real excited about it. And so,
absolutely. Well, that aspect, of course. Now, you're not only the co-author of the book, but the editor of the News Journal.
That's right.
Golly, you're a busy woman. How do you have time?
Well, it was hard fitting it in. It really, the book was a lot of work, and I think Jennifer and I probably didn't realize how much work it would be, but it was fun. But we sort of did it after hours. We would cram things together and work together, and because at the time Jennifer was working too, and a mom, and she was working for the city of Florence. She's since retired, so it was kind of hard to fit that in. But
and so from beginning to end, the project took, golly, months.
We only had really about 3 months from the time we signed the contract, and we had about 3 months to get it together. So that made it kind of hectic. But
I saw in the introduction y'all had written that the book wasn't done to be a historical perspective necessarily. Of course, the pictures themselves provide a ton of history, but that y'all really wanted a fun, entertaining piece that really helped guide readers through.
Yeah, it's a light look at the past. We tried to go back as far as we could and move it right on up to 2004. But there have been two very fine books written about Florence. One by Dr. Wayne King. He wrote Some Folks Do, and he did a pictorial history called, Some Folks Do was his pictorial.
Right.
And Rise Up Early in the Morning was his book. And then Nick Ziegler, Florence, A Renaissance Period, did a wonderful history with a lot of pictures. So we were trying to bring in, really, it's about 220 or 30 pictures in the book. And we tried to find a lot of different pictures. We used a few of the same pictures that had been used because when you go back 100 years, you know, your sources are limited, and there were some excellent pictures but for the most part, we have a lot of new stuff for people, and the point was to jog memories.
And it did for folks, I mean, even myself, who grew up in North Carolina, and just thinking about aspects of life, some of the amazing shots. There was a couple of shots from, I think it was a 50th anniversary, a couple of different pictures that were in there of a couple's 50th anniversary that really stuck out as I was going through the book. Can you share with the viewers a little about some of the pictures we're looking at?
These pictures were found in a box of pictures of one that bought an old home, and they shared these with me, and it was Thomas Harlee family, and the Harlees, of course, have played a big part in the history of Florence, and Florence was named for General Harlee's daughter. And but this was another member of the Harlee family, and in 1906, when they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary, these pictures were made, and it showed the interior of their home, And I thought that was very interesting to see what a home looked back around the turn of the century. And so we included those in the book.
As you and I were talking about earlier, how interesting in that shot of, it looks like a dining room, that it looks so sparsely decorated.
Yeah, compared to the way we decorate today in the furniture, it looked very sparse. And, of course, they had lots of candles and lace tablecloths and plants.
Oh, yeah.
Even back then, they had the plants decorating the home.
When you think about, golly, for yourself, having grown up in Florence, born in Florence, raised in the schools there in Florence, and having remained in Florence virtually your entire life, that aspect of, I'm sure there's a lot of new things you learned about Florence while you were putting it together.
Certainly, certainly. And I'm still learning, even after the book has come out. People have come up to me, or I even got a letter from a man in Florida who wrote a detailed letter and went through the book and pulled different memories from his own memories of the book and shared information. So it's still a learning experience even now. It's been a lot of fun.
Where are some of the places that a viewer could pick up a copy of the book? Are they all over the PD? Or are they down here on the Strand?
Well, we wish. They're pretty much located in Florence.
Right.
But Books A Million in Florence and Dixon Drug Company in downtown Florence has copies. Walgreens has copies. McLeod Hospital, which is our big hospital in Florence, they have the gift shop there. Great Expectations has copies of them. Porter's Gift Shop. There's probably about 10 or 11 places in and around Florence that they have these little displays with the book.
And when you think about some of the primary reasons, I mean, some of the big reasons that people would enjoy the book, it's just taking the time, and it's very reasonably priced, but taking the time just to go through, as you say, the guy in Florida, for instance, his recollection being jogged so much. So many folks, anyone who's either a native of the PD or has spent some time there.
Yes, and again, I think even for people that didn't grow up in Florence, they're pictures similar to the towns that they grew up in. That so it's been sort of interesting to me to see people that aren't from Florence that have bought the book and have enjoyed the book as well.
Very definitely, I enjoyed. I got to read this real quick, Brenda. I so much enjoyed reading about the authors because you all both, Jennifer, I think had moved to Florence. I think in 1978, spent her early childhood there and has remained there. But the excitement of y'all providing your different perspectives of what you would do on Saturdays, and in reading as a child, it was where I spent the center of activity, the downtown area, plopping down a quarter to see a movie at the Colonial or the Carolina Theater, enjoying a soda fountain, Coke, and nabs at J&J drugstore, the lunch counter there, shopping for clothes with your mom at the fashion center. You think about those things, and that alone jogs a lot of recollections for folks, I'm sure.
Oh, yes, and a lot of those places are gone now. Most of them are gone, so it's sort of interesting. Again, the guy in Florida that wrote me the letter mentioned the nabs that his father worked for the Nabisco company.
Oh, really?
And that's how it got the name. There were the cheese crackers, or cheese and peanut butter crackers, that we always called nabs. And he explained that back then Nabisco went by NAB, and that's how that name came about. So I didn't know that until I heard from somebody a little bit older that knew more of that part of history.
There were so many other great shots, and a name that's indicative or so well recognized both in the PD and the Strand, a shot of Captain Ashby there receiving some mail and going through that. Can you share with the viewers a little bit about this picture?
Yeah, well, this would have been back in the 50s on, it used to be Channel 8 in Florence, and WBTW Channel 8, I believe, at that time. But it was a children's program, and it was supposedly in a spaceship, and you would go and visit, and he would have usually birthday party groups or maybe a small brownie troop. I went on a couple times, but I could tell you the first time I went on there, and I must have been under 5 years old, I remember they kept saying we're going to be on Spaceship C8. And, of course, I watched it on TV. It came on every afternoon, probably around 5 o'clock. And I was so excited. And we drove up to the station. There was a tall tower there. And as a child, I thought we were going to have to climb that tower to get on that spaceship, you know, and I remember being petrified. And, of course, they took us inside the studio, and we filmed the shot. And he would talk to each person, each child. He would say something, ask you about what do you want to be when you grow up. And, of course, we usually said movie star or something exotic like that. But at the end of the show, we would each be given a bag of Jack's cookies.
Jack's cookies?
A whole bag. We were so excited, a whole bag of cookies. I guess Jack's Cookies was a advertiser or supporter of the show. I don't know, but I remember getting that bag of cookies and being so proud of that whole bag for myself.
Something you'd never forget, and this was prior to age 5.
Yes, oh yes.
That's amazing, Brenda. Golly, one of the other shots that was particularly exciting was this shot of Governor McNair signing legislation establishing a 4-year state-supported school there in Florence, I guess Francis Marion.
That's correct, and that was a big news for us. That picture was actually taken in Columbia, in the I guess the governor's office there. I don't remember exactly, but actually I had a cousin who shot the picture, Sonny Smith. He was a photographer for the Morning News at that time, and he took the picture. And James A. Rogers, who was chairman of the board of it was the chairman of the board for all the state colleges. I don't remember the name of that board, but he was editor of the Morning News at that time. And I, at that time, worked at the Morning News. I started as a high school student, and I was Mr. Rogers' secretary. So I remember typing on the old typewriter all of his correspondence. And being the editor, Mr. Rogers loved to rewrite. Of course, that's what writers do. We write and rewrite. And I would struggle so hard to get the letter perfect. And then he'd say, come in and change it, and I'd have to type it again. And I can remember because that was before word processors. And, and you know, if you made a mistake, you had to do it over, or either we did have whiteout that we used, but of course he didn't want to use that on his letter. So I remember him so well, and he was a wonderful man. And of course, he was chairman of the board that was, so he was there when the governor signed legislation. And at that time, we had a 2-year college in Florence. It was part of University of South Carolina at Florence. And so that was legislation making it a 4-year state-supported college.
I was particularly excited to see a former guest of the show. We hope to get back in soon, former Chief Justice David Harwell, who's in there. And that's some amazing, just throughout the book, there's so many familiar faces, and you come across so many names there. I know it's so exciting both for you and Jennifer.
Yes, and like I say, we're still finding more information about as the book has come out and more people see it. We're learning more ourselves.
Brenda, one thing you and I talked about a little bit earlier before we started was the Florence Little Theater, and you all recently celebrating your 80th anniversary. Are there some shots of the Florence Little Theater in here?
Well, actually, I don't have any from the productions, but yeah, there is one of the theater. We tried to include some of the landmarks around the city, but most of the books are in the city of Florence, and the Little Theater is just right outside our city limits. But I'd included a picture of the theater because it has been such a long part of the history, 80 years.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're excited about that, and I'm involved in the Little Theater, and so we had a love of that, too. And
you said 13 years ago, more or less, y'all kicked off that photo. Now, is it on the front of Section A or B, or is it throughout? We ran it on, in fact, Dr. King, who visited me one day, and he collects a lot of old photos. He's sort of a historian. He definitely is a historian for the city of Florence and for the Florence County. And Dr. King teaches history at Francis Marion University, and he is a Florence native. And he one day brought some old pictures by my office, and he would always be so excited when he'd find something new, and he'd come by and share it with me. And he said, maybe you want to run this in the paper? And I said, yeah, I'd love to. And it sort of started, it wasn't planned. We ran it, and it was a big hit with our readers, and so he brought me more, and he kept me supplied, and still does. He still does today. But we also get pictures from other people and run in our paper. And again, when we were working on this book, some of the pictures I remembered and went back and borrowed, and then used those same sources for new stuff. And so it sort of helped a lot to have those connections. Absolutely. How exciting. Lastly, Brenda, when you think of the aspects for yourself, of course, Jennifer coming to you about this and her already in touch with Arcadia Publishing and the excitement when she approached you about that, knowing this is something you've been doing more or less, I mean, bringing older pictures of the community to residents there with the support of the News Journal for 13 years. When you think of that excitement for you, seeing it all come together and really moving so fast in 3 months, is there any way to express that to the viewers of just the entire piece all coming together?
Well, it was just real exciting for Jennifer and I. We were just on pins and needles. We couldn't wait to get the book back and see it. And yes, and I've had people before say, you ought to put a book, you ought to do a book. And I'd kind of, in the back of my mind, thought, well, that would be a great thing to do. But it made it a lot easier when Jennifer came and a company that had the sort of down pat, and they told us exactly what to do and how to do it. Made it a lot easier to get it done, I think. And that's the only way we could have gotten it done as quickly as we did, because we had deadlines and you do this and you do that, and so it made it a whole lot easier. And I would love to do a second book now, because even now people coming to me and saying, oh, well, I had pictures of this and that and the other. Right. So I think we could easily do a second book.
People have been coming to her for years, telling her she needed to do this. Fortunately, Jennifer came to her and told her, we got the time, we got 3 months, we're going to get it done. Listen to Jennifer in a few minutes, visiting with us. Brenda, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Stay tuned to Jennifer Leach coming up on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome back to Carolina People. This morning we're at the Fox 43 studio. We're still focused on Florence, Images of America, and we're visiting with the co-author, Jennifer Leach. Good morning, Jennifer.
Good morning.
It was so exciting hearing Brenda go over some of those shots from the book. There's some amazing photos in there.
Definitely. We've got some really interesting photos that most people, because we pulled from personal collections of photographs, we tried to get some photos that have not been published or haven't been seen that often. So it's a really neat book.
Now, how did you do? Was it because the News Journal had been printing those pictures for the last many years and you knew Brenda was the editor there? Is that part of the reason why you approached her?
That's exactly the reason I approached her. Yeah. So definitely.
How had Arcadia Publishing gotten in touch with you, or did you get in touch with them? How did that work?
Well, they got in touch with me. I worked for the City of Florence. I was the Special Projects Coordinator, but I also was the webmaster for our website. And so they sent in a request for information, somebody who might be interested in doing a book like this, and it just happened to come across my desk. So as the webmaster and the Special Projects Coordinator, I approached the city manager, who said definitely this would be something we wanted to do.
So the city wrapped around it? And,
oh, yes.
I guess the county would, I mean, everyone would want to wrap around
Definitely,
it.
Definitely.
And that's pretty indicative of Arcadia. Do they approach folks in communities? They've got quite a few of these Images of America.
I don't know how they approach other communities. I think it was sort of odd because Florence, there are many books published about many communities across the southeast, and Florence, the size that it was, didn't have any books from Arcadia. There are several communities that have 4 or 5 written. So I think they approached us because there had been no interest in doing a book like this, or nobody really had the resources to do a book like this.
I'm so interested in reading in your introduction some of the aspects of Florence people don't think about all the time. The splitting of I-95, I-20 beginning or ending there, essentially. I mean, some of the aspects of its founding in '69 and the incorporation in 1890, and then all those other aspects, just how it got its name.
Right.
From Harley's daughter there, who was reading a book.
The father was reading a book.
That's right.
Yeah.
Was it a Charles Dickens book?
It was a Charles Dickens book, and so that's how he came upon the name Florence.
Amazing, amazing. How about, let's talk real quick about the photo on the cover of the book. Probably a couple of guys that a heck of a lot of Florentines know, and maybe folks from outside the area.
Well, it's a photo of Walter Lawson, a local businessman, and Haig Porter at 5 years old. It was taken in Walter Lawson's backyard. Haig Porter served as mayor of the city of Florence from 1991 to 95. So both are very prominent members of the Florence community and are very well known to most Florentines.
I'm sure, and he's the predecessor to your current mayor.
Certainly.
Mayor Willis.
Mayor
there.
Willis.
When you think about that, so the idea for coming up with the book is really something that Arcadia came to you about.
And I approached Brenda because, you know, the News Journal being so supportive of community events, and Brenda publishing all of those different photos, it was just a natural fit to approach Brenda to do something like this.
Now, had you already begun, I mean, Brenda pointed out the project took 3 months. I mean, you were on a heavy time deadline. Had you already begun doing a little bit even before approaching her, or did you?
No, not really. I think it was my working on the book was contingent on Brenda working on the book. Initially, Arcadia approached me a year prior to me approaching Brenda, and because the schedule at the city was so hefty at the time, it had to be put off several times. And then finally, I thought if we're going to do this, I need to call Brenda and see if she's willing to get involved.
How about new things you learned about Florence from research in the book? Of course, as we said earlier, you moved there in '78, moved to Florence in '78, and essentially spent much of your early childhood there.
Right. I think everything, all the pictures from '78 forward are things I remember, but everything prior to that was a learning experience, something new. Everything was new. It was just really neat to see how Florence has evolved. I know how Florence evolved from '78 on, and the changes have just been dramatic. So to see places like 5 Points, and it's so congested now, but in the early times it was just nothing. It was a field. It's just amazing.
I love those couple lines, and I read that earlier with Brenda, so I got to read yours. I realized how lucky I was to grow up in Florence. Saturdays were spent buying candy from Kohl's Grocery, catching a movie at the Crown Theater, or just riding bikes with friends in my neighborhood. I can't imagine raising my family anywhere else. That's a powerful line.
Well, it's true. When you're little and you're growing up in a place like Florence, which seems like there's not much to do, you just don't realize the safety factor that goes along with that. And, you know, my family's here and we have so many good friends. I just really can't imagine growing up or raising a family anyplace else. It's just a great place to live.
I saw you spent, is it 4 years in Charleston?
4 years in Charleston at the College of Charleston, and then 3 additional years in their master's program. So I was there 7 years. Charleston's great, too.
Yeah, I know. I was about to say that's another community that a heck of a lot of folks say, I can't imagine living anywhere else.
Oh, I know.
You've lived in 2 great areas there.
Really
you still have family in Florence?
My parents live in Florence, my sister and her husband, and my grandparents just moved to Florence. So they're retiring in Florence.
Oh, you're kidding? Wow. And you all actually have one on the way. Do you mind me? Yeah. Spring into that.
Oh, yes. We've got a 3-year-old at home and one on the way. So I'm almost 8 months pregnant, and this will be a big change, but we're enjoying it.
Yes. How exciting. How exciting. When you think about the potential enjoyment that folks would have from the book, why do you think people would particularly enjoy the book?
As I mentioned earlier, I think people are going to enjoy this book because so many of the pictures are from personal collections. So you'll see pictures that you've seen in other books. There are really good books about Florence already published. But many of these are pictures from personal collections, so they might not have been seen before. And it's such a good collection of photographs that if you've lived here or if you've visited, something's going to jog your memory and bring back good memories for you. So I think it's just a really good book.
Jennifer, for a viewer in their community throughout the PD or here on the Strand or in southeastern North Carolina who may be interested in doing something similar to this, if they didn't have an Arcadia, or obviously they could possibly contact Arcadia, but if they didn't have something like that, what are some of the things that a viewer would need to know to be able to put a book like this together?
We were so lucky because Arcadia came to us, and because they've done this so many times before, they were so organized. I really don't know. The hardest part of this book for us, or for me personally, was actually eliminating pictures. We had so many pictures, so many photographs to choose from, and such a limited amount that we could use. So just really amassing the photographs and getting the correct captions, and that's really the bulk of the work for the book.
So a viewer would know they can't put all the pictures in there.
They can't put all the pictures, and needs to be a diverse collection of photographs, things that may not have been seen before, and correct captions, and just things that people are going to be interested in looking at for that community.
Knowing the intense pressure over that 3 months, do you think you'd do it again, Jennifer? We heard Brenda talking about you've got enough, and a lot of, the book came out in February, so there's obviously a lot of folks already excited about it.
Oh, definitely. I would do it again. It was great working with Brenda. It was great to see all these photographs. I learned so much. So, yes, it was worthwhile.
You heard her say it, simple. She'd do it again. I think Brenda's in support of that as well, and you may be seeing part 2 out, volume 2 coming out, Florence, Images of America. The excitement is upon us. Jennifer, thanks so much for being with us
Thank
this morning.
you.
Absolutely. Stay tuned to more Carolina People coming up next. We want to thank Brenda Harrison and Jennifer Leach for coming in to share some of their memories of Florence, Images of America. Get it in your local bookstore.